Hey, welcome everyone to a casual gamer's review of Warhammer 40K Space Marine 2. Now, full disclosure, there are no spoilers in this review. I'll keep it as simple as possible. And this review is only focusing on the single player campaign, the one that focuses on Titus throughout all his battles in the campaign that lasts about 9.5, 10 hours is what it took me. That'll probably what take you. So is it worth the full price? Because here in Canada, after tax in Ontario, it's like $103. Although, even though it's only been out for a month, it's already on sale for $70 plus tax. In the United States, full price is $60. So is it worth it? And if yes, who is it for? Is it for the hardcore Warhammer fans or just anybody? Now, there are other game modes available like Operations, which takes you to a different perspective of what happens throughout the campaign. I'm not focusing on that. That is designed more for multiplayer. There is a patch and workarounds that allows you to play offline with bots, but it's not recommended because it's a bit harder and it's always best to play with human beings instead of a bot. And then of course the regular PvP mode. So the campaign itself, you do have 2 companion bots, and surprisingly the AI on them is pretty good. They do take a lot of aggro. They do a fair amount of damage to opposing enemies. They do a rock solid job. But anyway, so going back to it. So this is a single player campaign review and there's no spoilers. And full transparency, you might notice that the game clips I have here are somewhat repetitive in the same stages for 2 reasons. One is that as the story progresses, new enemy types are shown, which kind of give away some elements of spoilers, which I'm trying to avoid. The other part is that Microsoft released a bad patch for the Xbox that broke screen recording completely. This is a known issue that's been happening to a lot of people on Reddit for many months. It finally hit me during this campaign, unfortunately. And I have to admit, I'm not a Warhammer 40K specialist or fan as much as I'm a nerd about technology, webtoons, manga. I never got into Warhammer 40K. I watched a recap video on YouTube of what to expect to catch up and play Marine 2, and honestly, it's very intriguing to me now. The lore is like crazy, how rich the story is. You got politics, Marine and their commanding officer structure. You have technology, science, religion plays a heavy part. I was kind of weird about it at the beginning, but as the story progressed, like, this is pretty cool blend of everything. But can you just jump into this game without understanding the Warhammer 40K lore? Yeah, but you'll be missing a lot of things. Like, it'll just go over your head, especially things closer to the ending of the game. It's not recommended for someone who doesn't understand Warhammer 40K. Do what I did and just watch a recap video on YouTube, a couple of them, and you'll be good and you'll understand and appreciate the story that much more. The game opens up with Titus part of the Death Watch, and him and his crew are crash landing on a planet, and they're trying to find off the Tyranites, which is an alien of a hive mind. So they kind of are super aggressive. They come in massive waves, which are visually incredibly impressive. I played this on Xbox Series X, and I was blown away about how many enemies can stack up and attack you. It's visually incredible what they've achieved here. There are some elements closer to the ending of the game where the waves of enemies become so large that there is frame droppage. It has caused me to take a fair amount of hits here and there. It doesn't like make it impossible to beat the game, but even with performance mode on, so I've chose higher frames per second over graphics on the Xbox Series X mode, it still struggles a little bit. It's, again, not that bad, but just something to expect as you get closer to the ending of the game. And it's him now crashing on a planet with him and his squad, and he needs to fight off the Tyranid hive mind aliens that are like running rampant, making it tough for humans to stand a firm ground in this battle that's taking across outer space. From there, things just get worse to worse, and then of course, as the story progresses, Titus is, put in with a new crew. At first I found everyone robotic, almost like a Terminator. They have no emotions, what have you, because they're genetically modified human beings that are designed to just be combat specialists. You're like 8 feet tall compared to regular humans. You're like a walking tank. Everything is very reminiscent of Gears of War until I realized that the game mechanics are very different. There's no duck and cover system. Everything is dodge and parry if you need to. And not only that, there's a heavy emphasis on melee combat. I found the first level of Space Marine 2 very challenging because I'm used to, finding cover and shooting from afar. In a shooting game, you shoot from afar. But what I realized after a little while is like, no, the game encourages you to make heavy use of melee combat. In fact, I started preferring melee combat much more over shooting in particular battles because it's just so darn fun, especially when you get certain weapons like the hammer, which is my favorite melee weapon. That's not a spoiler because you can see it in the armory early in the game. You just can't unlock it. It'll be available later in the game. So heavy emphasis on melee and combat shooting. There's like a mixed blend of the two, which is very unique to me, but I found it really awesome. And at the beginning of the game, everyone is pretty emotionless. Everyone's like very robotic, like a Terminator, but as the story progresses, everyone's emotions, like their human side starts to appear. There's a lot of arguments, there's a lot of fighting, questioning, and doubts. Very human emotions. There is trust, and it builds up. You see character development happening throughout many of the side characters and Titus himself throughout the game as it progresses, and I love that. So the story in game itself comes off pretty repetitive. Go to this planet, fight this battle, rescue this person, drop this item here. It's repetitive. What makes the game fresh in the campaign is the rich, deep lore of the story, the other items that come into play, the kind of like the religious aspect of it, some of the science. It's very unique take on things. I found that it kept things pretty fresh and intriguing throughout the whole story. I actually thoroughly enjoyed it eventually. The other thing that's kind of repetitive though is the combat. It's shoot, melee, parry, dodge, and the game mechanics are, well, they're pretty repetitive. There's something that kind of makes it unique. There's like a jetpack sequence. You get it a couple times, which I found to be super fun. The drop melee attack is my favorite by far. It's just so overpowered and fun to squash enemies. But other than that, it gets pretty repetitive. What keeps the game fresh is how slowly they introduce new enemy types throughout the game. And of course, the lore gets more and more fascinating as the game progresses. Capped at 10 hours was enough to keep it still fresh in my mind and not kind of overbearing and, oh man, this is getting really boring and repetitive. My only gripe with the story was that there's one part, again, trying to spoil anything here, where the Space Marines are really stumped about a certain attack they're gonna take. Like, how do we approach this? And Titus just points on the map. He's like, go here and you'll figure it out. Everyone around him is just like, how did you know that? There's no information on the map. You just pointed at something random. He's like, just trust me on it. Everyone's like, okay, we'll do it. And it'll work out. They never explained how he got to that point. How did he point out that specific part on the map when everyone else doubted him? They just kind of like, it was lazy writing on that part. It didn't ruin the story, but I was just like, seriously, you could have, fixed that with a couple of lines here and there, but they didn't. In terms of game bugs, there weren't really any. I did notice that when going up and down elevators, sometimes my companion bots would kind of like start vibrating. It was just funny visually, but then they're fine. You don't get stuck. Otherwise, there was no crashes of any kind, no other glitches. I did find that there was some rendering issues with certain cutscenes. Now, there's two types of cutscenes. One are like filmed, like pre-animated videos you're just kind of watching, and one are in-game cutscenes with in-game graphics. What I found bizarre is that during all the combat with it's just crazy blood and crazy amount of enemies everywhere, it does a pretty good job, except for those massive waves where there's some slight frame droppage. But during the cutscenes when things are very slow moving, there were certain cutscenes where things just didn't render properly. Vision looks blurry. It looks almost like 480p instead of like 1080p or 4K, 2160p. And then after a minute, it'll render just fine. Or sometimes the cutscenes are so short, it didn't have time to render in all the particle effects. I found that very strange and hoping that something will be fixed with the bug update. It's not going to ruin the experience, but it does kind of throw you off, and everyone's talking about a story element item, and you're like, what's happening with the graphics all of a sudden? Okay, but who is this for? It's a fun game. I've been preaching and saying nothing but good things about it, but let's say you're not able to get on sale, it's full price, $100 Canadian after tax, or $60 plus whatever state tax you have in the United States. Should you buy it at full price for a 10-hour campaign? It's a tough one. I would highly recommend that you wait on a sale. It's very expensive. My take is wait on a sale, be patient. This is a game that's already been on sale in the first month. Within 6 months it's gonna be dramatically dropped in price. But what if you're a hardcore Warhammer fan? Do you want to pay the full price? That's really dependent on how hardcore of a fan you are. I don't know if that really helps you making your decision making, but that's kind of where I stand, is like, you really got to be a passionate fan about this to justify the price tag. So I hope you found this video useful and it helps you kind of decide on what to do. And that's pretty much it. So be sure to check out my social links and website link in the video description. Hit the like button, it does help, subscribe, and thanks for watching.